During the time that we had a little thing with 50 and with the whole Joe and all that, a lot of other guys I seen, they did a lot of running, a lot of hiding and all that.
Told you, I seen Pistol Pete, two little Spanish mother. Shh. So we gotta be ready, gotta keep something, cause
Yeah.
Pistol Pete, the real one, rich, all who's around him real.
I like to tell the people home, I feel so safe tonight with all this police protection courtesy of G Unit. Man. Pussy boy.
50 Cent and his G-Unit crew have found themselves in countless beefs over the years, some serious, some not so much. But one serious one was when Pistol Pete stepped into the mix. That's when G-Unit realized they were dealing with a whole different kind of threat.
Well, was there ever a time you was beefing with somebody like, damn, we gotta beef with him?
I think Fat Joe, man. Them Spanish niggas from the Bronx, them niggas, man, are just crazy. Like Pistol Pete, he was gonna go all the way. Like Pete, my man, one time I ran into him in the Diamond District.
Let's break down why. Pistol Pete is widely known as a true Bronx legend, a street general who really lived that life. Pete was heavily affiliated with Fat Joe and the Terror Squad, and even though he never grabbed the mic himself, his name carried major weight in hip-hop circles because of his street reputation. People respected him, and more importantly, people feared him. Now, Pete wasn't just some background figure, he had a serious history. He did a 10-year bid for attempted murder and came home in 1996. But his time on the outside was short-lived. Less than a year later, he was back behind bars, this time for what he casually described as extorting drug dealers and ish. That's the kind of life he was in. He eventually got released for good in 2002 after serving about 17 years total. And even though Pete was mainly rooted in the streets, he still found himself brushing up against the hip-hop world in some pretty wild ways. One lesser-known but interesting story from Pete's past happened in the late 90s and involved none other than Wu-Tang Clan and the Notorious Big.
I love Raekwon, man. It's my brother. But during that era, Biggie had some problems with Wu-Tang. I really don't know anything about the rap. Don't give two shits. I'm in the street collecting.
At the time, Pete was fresh out of prison, hanging heavy with Fat Joe and Big Pun, enjoying a little freedom after a long stretch. One night during a party or club event, Biggie was in the building, and so were some Wu-Tang members or affiliates. Now, if you know anything about 1990s New York rap, you know that there was real tension between certain camps. Wu-Tang and Bad Boy weren't exactly best friends. There was always this low-key rivalry bubbling under the surface, some of it from competitive energy, some of it from actual street politics. According to Pete's recollection, things almost got ugly that night. Apparently, some Wu dudes looked like they were about to press Biggie, maybe even jump him. But Pete was called by a friend to help, and he immediately stepped in.
So D-Rob came to me, he was like, yo, what's up, Pistol, what up, yo, what up, D? He said, yo, so he was, like, yo, these guys trying to front on Biggie and like that, man, like I might need you to, help us out, hold me down. I was like, let's get it. And I'm just the type of person, the action, like, let's go.
Pete says Raekwon was one of the main people involved in that confrontation, but instead of letting emotions boil over, he pulled Ray aside and they actually talked it out like men. Pete made it very clear that there was no fight, no threats, just conversation. He didn't need to flex or act tough. They both understood the bigger picture and decided it wasn't worth turning the spot into a war zone. Pete has told this story a few times over the years and always makes sure to stress that he never tried to play Raekwon or Wu-Tang like they were soft. Quite the opposite. He's spoken with nothing but respect for Ray and the entire Wu-Tang Clan.
Wu-Tang Clan was to be deep as I'm talking about, deep as 100 people. Like, that's a lot of people to be in there. For you to try to get 50 people, 100 people, 75 people in a club?
He didn't want people twisting the story like he punked them or something. He just did what real ones do, kept the peace when things could have gone left real fast. Another major clash in Pistol Pete's long list of hip-hop entanglements involved none other than Bronx rapper French Montana. This beef was less about rap bars and more about personal betrayal, according to Pete. It all started when French's career began to take off in the late 2000s. Back then, French was just a hustling Bronx kid trying to break into the game. He was known for his City DVDs, and he was floating around the Terror Squad circle. At the time, Pistol Pete saw him as a little bro of sorts, someone who looked up to him, leaned on him, and even came to him for protection and street advice. But things started to change when French linked up with Diddy and signed to Bad Boy Records. As his fame and money grew, Pete felt like French switched up on the people who had held him down. He felt like French left the Bronx and its real ones behind and started moving funny, like he was too Hollywood to remember where he came from. By 2018, things boiled over. Pete took to Instagram and let it all out in the most Bronx way possible. He posted an old photo of him and French together, a reminder of how close they once were, and then called him out hard in the caption. He said French had changed up just like the rest of the Bad Boy family, and warned he was ready to expose all these P in this fake industry. He even dropped a homophobic slur while blasting French for his association with Bad Boy. To make it even more intense, Pete posted a video warning anyone riding with French to stay far out of it.
A couple months ago, I got in trouble, you know, because I kind of went crazy on French Montana.
In a 2019 interview, Pete went deeper into what really caused the fallout. He didn't just accuse French of changing, he painted him as weak, scared, and opportunistic. According to Pete, during the peak of the G-Unit versus Terror Squad beef, French was constantly paranoid about getting caught in the middle. Pete claimed French once confessed that he was terrified Fat Joe's brother, Macho, would smack him just for being cool with 50 Cent, since French had ties to both camps at different times.
He used to be scared for years, running around, scared Macho Joe gonna smack me, you know, because I kind of 50 and all this. He's a paranoid, scared guy for years.
Pete didn't stop there. He shared a story that had people raising their eyebrows, a moment that showed just how much French used to rely on him. He said French would get so drunk sometimes he'd call Pete up asking for help. "Yo, Pete, I'm drunk. Can you please take me to the hotel?" Pete said he'd scoop him up, walk him to the room, and literally tuck him in like a babysitter. "All right, have a good night, buddy," he'd tell him. The way Pete tells it, it wasn't just protection, it was babysitting.
Florida, he's calling me, he got all this tons of fake jewelry and all that. "Yo, P, I'm away drunk. Could you please take me to the hotel?" Go pick him up, bring him to the hotel, make sure tuck him in. "You good? Okay, have a great night, buddy."
He said tuck him in.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying for real.
And the industry definitely caught wind of all this. In 2020, during a social media beef between French and 50 Cent, 50 posted a clip of Pete's interview where he trashed French. 50 used it as ammo to call French a snake who flip-flops too much, saying, "He switched sides a lot. He a sucker. That's why the Dream Chasers beat his ass." And when it came to the legendary beef between G-Unit and Terror Squad, of course Pistol Pete was right there in the thick of it. He was standing tall with his day ones, Fat Joe and the whole crew, ready to go to war if needed. So here's how things really kicked off between 50 Cent and Fat Joe, because it didn't start as anything personal. According to 50, it all began because Fat Joe decided to side with Ja Rule. Now if you know anything about 50's history, then you know Ja Rule was one of his biggest and most bitter enemies back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Ja Rule was one of the key figures in Murder Inc., a label that at the time had some of the biggest names in East Coast hip-hop circling around it. DMX, Jay-Z, and others. 50, on the other hand, was still coming up, and his first major shot at Ja came in 1999 when he dropped Life's on the Line, a clear diss track aimed at Rule. Apparently someone from 50's crew had allegedly robbed Ja at gunpoint, and ever since, things had never been the same. What followed was one of the longest running and most infamous beefs in hip-hop, filled with diss tracks, interviews, and straight-up chaos. Fast forward to 2004, and here's where Fat Joe comes into the picture. That year, Joe jumped on a track with Ja Rule and Jadakiss called New York. The track was widely viewed as a subliminal shot at 50, especially coming from Ja. So when Joe and Jada agreed to do it, 50 saw it as them picking a side. And once you're on Ja Rule's side, you're officially on 50's hit list. By early 2005, 50 started dissing Fat Joe and Jadakiss regularly, and one of his first major shots came on the track Piggy Bank off his second album The Massacre, which dropped in March 2005. In the animated video, 50 plays a kid at an arcade boxing game, and his opponents are made to look like Joe, Jada, and even Nas.
Joe, don't be screaming, get at me, dog. How you running for your life when I'm at your point?
In the second verse, he throws a jab at Fat Joe saying, "That fat dude thought Lean Back was in da club. My ish sold 11 mil. His ish was a dud."
Fat thought Lean Back was in the club. My sold 11 mil. His was a dud.
That was a direct dig comparing 50's massive hit Inda Club with Joe's 2004 smash Lean Back, basically calling Joe's success lightweight in comparison. But Joe wasn't about to stay quiet. On his sixth album, All or Nothing, which dropped in June 2005, he fired back with a scathing diss track titled My Fofo. It was aimed straight at 50, and Joe went in. He clowned 50 for the Candy Shop video, accused him of taking steroids, and claimed that 50 was ducking the public by rolling around with police escorts and private security. Joe even threw in references to the 2004 Vibe Awards incident when Dr. Dre got punched and Young Buck stabbed the dude who did it.
Get back to the Vibe Awards where that disrespected and snuffed your balls. Minute ago they didn't do. That's a shame. I was sitting right in the front.
Joe also touched on the rising tension between 50 and the Game, which had just exploded around the same time. Earlier that year, 50 had gone on air and publicly announced that the Game was no longer part of G-Unit, which sparked yet another beef. Joe called 50 out for being jealous of the Game's success, suggesting that 50 couldn't stand to see anyone else from his camp shining.
On top, now you jealous of him. When your shit gon' stop, UCB funk.
At that point, 50 had a long list of enemies. Ja Rule, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, The Game. Even older heads like Jeezy and Jay-Z had taken shots at him over the years, especially after he dropped How to Rob, a track where 50 hilariously laid out how he would rob every rapper in the game. That track alone got him on half the industry's bad side. As for Fat Joe, he kept it relatively cool in interviews. He'd often say he had no personal issue with 50, and made it clear that he wasn't into fake beef and wasn't trying to play along with the games.
Like, I personally ain't never had no problems with them. You know what I'm saying? And they, they just try to disrespect me. I ain't into that battle rap stuff, That's for cowards, walking around with 20 bodyguards standing behind them, you know what I mean? Going nah, you know what I'm saying?
Later that same year, things really got spicy between Fat Joe and 50 Cent, and this time it all played out live on national TV. It was June during the MTV Video Music Awards, and Fat Joe was on stage presenting the award for Best Hip Hop Video. But before getting to the winner, Joe couldn't resist throwing a jab, saying, "I feel so safe tonight with all this police protection, courtesy of G-Unit."
I like to tell the people home, I feel so safe tonight with all this police protection, courtesy of G-Unit.
That line hit hard, especially because it was one of the most common insults used against 50 at the time, calling him a snitch or accusing him of rolling deep with security and police protection. Naturally, 50 didn't let that slide. He clapped back almost immediately. While he and Tony Yayo were on stage performing, 50 responded right then and there, making his own slick comments aimed at Joe.
Hey man, pussy boy, fuck boy, fuck.
That moment became one of the most memorable petty face-offs in award show history, and Fat Joe would later go on to talk about it in his autobiography, The Book of Jose. According to Joe, 50 was spending the entire ceremony trying to provoke him. The drama didn't stop at the VMAs either. Just a few months later, in March, 50 dropped a wild video called Fat Joe's Funeral. The video was a full mock funeral, complete with a eulogy, black suits, and funeral music, all making fun of Joe's supposedly low album sales.
We sold like 46,000 copies.
50 even managed to throw a weird compliment into the mix, comparing Joe's numbers to Rick Ross's then current chart-topping album and giving props to Ross for doing better. Which, if you think about it, is hilarious in hindsight, because not long after that, 50 and Rick Ross would be throwing shots at each other too. Then, when Fat Joe dropped his album, The Elephant in the Room, 50 and G-Unit responded the only way they knew how: petty and ruthless. G-Unit released a mixtape called Elephant in the Sand, which was clearly aimed at Joe. The title was a play on Joe's album name and his size, and the cover showed a photoshopped image of Fat Joe lying on the beach. Not to be outdone, Fat Joe fired back with a mixtape of his own called Gay Unit Volume 1 Kill All Rats, hosted by Joe. The mixtape was basically an anti-G-Unit project filled with diss tracks from various artists going at 50, Yayo, and Lloyd Banks. The cover art showed the G-Unit trio shirtless, holding each other, trying to paint them as gay. And funny enough, when Rick Ross and 50 eventually began their own beef, Ross recycled the same angle, releasing a parody video titled Gay Unit Workouts where he mocked G-Unit in the same way Joe did. But 50 wasn't done clowning Fat Joe. He dropped yet another video mocking him for low album sales again. In this video, 50 claimed that Joe's latest project had sold only 5,000 copies, roasting him mercilessly for flopping. Fat Joe, for his part, kept his composure and responded in an interview with DJ Vlad. He didn't shy away from the sales talk but corrected the numbers, saying he actually sold 12,000 copies, not 5,000, and reminded everyone that he wasn't signed to a major label anymore, so the expectations were different. He also used the moment to take a jab of his own, pointing out that 50 went from selling 10 million copies with Get Rich or Die Tryin' to struggling to even go gold with his latest album, Before I Self-Destruct. Though to be fair, that album did eventually go gold. Unfortunately, on August 30th, 2012, the hip-hop world was hit with some heartbreaking news. Chris Lighty, the influential music executive, was found dead in his Bronx apartment from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The death was ruled a but many people close to him weren't so sure. The idea that Chris, a respected and successful figure who had managed the careers of Busta Rhymes, 50 Cent, Fat Joe, and many others, would take his own life didn't sit well with everyone. In the weeks that followed, tributes began pouring in from all corners of the hip-hop community. And just a month later, in September, Fat Joe jumped on the remix to Slaughterhouse's song Goodbye. On his verse, Joe opened up about the passing of Chris Lighty and mentioned something many fans didn't know. Chris had actually been working behind the scenes trying to squash the long-running beef between him and 50 Cent.
You couldn't stop the 50 but I ain't never looked at you no different, Chris. You was my...
Then came the BET Hip Hop Awards that October, a major night in the industry, but it also turned out to be a turning point in this years-long feud. According to Fat Joe, something unexpected happened that night. While at the awards show, 50 Cent approached him and shook Joe's hand and told him he wanted to let the beef go, out of respect for Chris Lighty. Now, there's always been a debate in hip-hop circles about rap beefs. On one hand, they can be a great marketing tool, something to even boost record sales. But there's a darker side to it too. And in this case, the fallout from the 50 Cent verses. Fat Joe beef had some real consequences. In 2022, Fat Joe released his memoir, The Book of Jose, and one of the things he revealed was just how much the beef had cost him outside of music. According to Joe, he was this close to becoming the first rapper ever to sign a sneaker deal with the Jordan brand. The deal was estimated to be worth around $20 million and would have been a huge milestone. But after the infamous 2005 VMAs incident where Joe dissed 50 Cent live on stage, the deal was dead. Joe said Michael Jordan personally called him and explained that he didn't like drama or public beefs, and that because of that, they couldn't move forward. That same year, in a DJ Vlad interview, Tony Yayo also reflected on the whole era. He was asked about the many beefs G-Unit had been involved in, and Yayo said that out of all the conflicts they'd had, the two most serious and real ones were with Fat Joe and Jimmy Henchman. He downplayed the drama with Ja Rule, calling it more of a surface-level thing in comparison. Looking back now, it's wild to think that the beef between 50 Cent and Fat Joe lasted almost a full decade, from the moment Ja Rule dropped the track New York in 2004 to Chris Lighty's death in 2012. It's unfortunate that it took losing someone they both respected to finally bring them together, but at least they found a way to let it go. And in the end, this is one of those rare beefs that, while it got messy with words and egos, stayed mostly on wax and in interviews, never fully boiling over into the type of violence that sadly claimed lives in the past.